I never imagined that the day my only son got married would be the day I truly understood how invisible I had become. I stood at the edge of the marble courtyard, my hands folded over a simple navy dress I had bought on sale months earlier, watching guests drift past me in silks, tailored suits, and diamonds that glittered under the Mediterranean sun. The wedding was being held on a cliffside in southern Italy, overlooking the sea, the kind of place you only see in glossy magazines or luxury travel ads. White roses cascaded down stone pillars, a string quartet played softly in the background. Everything about it screamed wealth, perfection, exclusivity. Everything except me. At 70 years old, I had learned how to stand quietly without being noticed. I had learned how to make myself small so others could feel big. But standing there that day, watching strangers sip champagne that I had unknowingly paid for, I felt smaller than I ever had in my life. My son, Daniel, was getting married to Isabella Romano. Even her name sounded expensive. She came from a family that valued appearances above all else. Old money, old connections, old traditions. From the moment Daniel introduced her to me 3 years ago, I knew I would never truly belong in her world. She never raised her voice at me in private. She didn't have to. Her power came from polite smiles that never reached her eyes, from compliments that felt like insults if you listened closely enough. "Oh, that's such a humble dress," she'd say. "You must be very resourceful. It's wonderful how happy you are with so little." Daniel always told me I was imagining things. "She's just blunt, Mom. She doesn't mean it like that. You know how sensitive you are." So I stayed quiet. I always stayed quiet. When the invitation arrived, thick cream paper with gold lettering, my hands shook as I opened it. Destination wedding, 5 days, luxury resort, no expenses spared. There was no mention of cost, no reassurance that accommodations were covered, just a date, a location, and the assumption that everyone invited could afford it. I almost declined. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time that night, the invitation resting beside a cold cup of tea, wondering if my presence would be more of a burden than a blessing. But this was my son. My only child. I raised him alone after his father died when Daniel was just 9 years old. I worked 3 jobs. I skipped meals. I wore the same coat for 15 winters so he could have new shoes. I told myself I deserved to be there. So I booked the flight. I chose the cheapest room at a small inn 30 minutes away from the venue. I packed 1 suitcase and 1 pair of sensible shoes. When I arrived in Italy, no one was waiting for me. Daniel had promised to pick me up, but when I called him, he sounded distracted. "Mom, I'm swamped. Just take a taxi, okay? I'll see you at the rehearsal dinner." The rehearsal dinner. That night should have been my warning. The restaurant was carved into the side of the cliff, candle-lit tables overlooking the sea. I arrived early, hoping to find Daniel before everyone else arrived. Instead, I stood awkwardly near the entrance while waiters rushed past me, assuming I was lost. When Isabella arrived with her family, conversation stopped. They were stunning, effortlessly polished. Isabella wore a white silk dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her mother barely glanced at me. Her father looked through me as if I were part of the furniture. "Oh, you made it," Isabella said when she finally noticed me. Not, "I'm glad you're here," not, "You look nice," just, "You made it." At dinner, I was seated at the far end of the table, next to a distant cousin I'd never met. Daniel sat 3 seats away, absorbed in conversation with Isabella's uncle about vineyards and investment portfolios. He never once looked in my direction. When the bill came, Isabella's father made a show of waving it away. "Don't worry, family takes care of family," he said loudly. I almost laughed, if only he knew. The wedding day arrived, warm and bright. I stood alone as I could feel hundreds of eyes on me as the room fell into an uneasy silence. The kind of silence that happens not because people are respectful, but because they sense something is about to go wrong. My fingers curled around the microphone. For a split second, fear surged through me. Not fear of speaking, but fear of finally being seen. Once words leave your mouth, there is no hiding anymore, and I had spent decades hiding in plain sight. Daniel stared at me from across the room, confusion flickering across his face. Isabella leaned toward him, whispering something sharp into his ear. I saw the irritation in her eyes, the way her jaw clenched as if I were a stain on her perfect evening. I almost stepped away. Almost. But then I remembered every birthday Daniel spent pretending to like a gift I could barely afford. Every night I went to bed hungry so he could eat. Every time I told myself, this is what love looks like. You give, you don't ask. I lifted my chin. "Good evening," I said into the microphone. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I won't take much of your time. I know tonight is about celebration." A few guests exchanged glances. Someone laughed nervously. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Margaret Hale. I'm Daniel's mother." There was polite applause, thin, obligatory. I've been called many things in my life," I said slowly. "Strong, difficult, old-fashioned, invisible." I paused, and today I was called a beggar. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. Isabella's head snapped up, her smile vanished. I looked directly at her. "I want to be very clear," I said. "I don't begrudge anyone for their wealth, their beauty, or their privilege. What I do mind is cruelty." Daniel shifted in his chair. "Mom," he muttered under his breath. I ignored him. "I didn't come here to embarrass anyone. I came here because this is my son's wedding, because I believed that no matter how small my place was in this world, I still mattered to him." My throat tightened, but I didn't let my voice break. "I see now that I was mistaken." Whispers spread like wildfire. Isabella's head snapped up, her smile vanished. I looked directly at her. "You see," I continued, "I've always preferred to stay in the background. I never wanted my son to feel indebted to me. I wanted him to love me because he was my mother, not because of what I could provide." I paused, letting the weight of that settle. "So I kept secrets." A waiter froze mid-step. The band stopped tuning their instruments. "What secrets?" someone murmured. I glanced around the room, at the chandeliers, the flowers, the polished marble floors. "This beautiful venue," I said, gesturing around us, "the catering, the decorations, the accommodations, the welcome gifts in your rooms, even the honeymoon planned for the Maldives." Isabella laughed sharply. "What about them?" "I paid for all of it." The words landed like a thunderclap. Laughter erupted, but it wasn't amused. It was disbelieving. "That's not funny," Isabella snapped. "It's not a joke," I replied calmly. Daniel stood up. "Mom, please, you're confused." Confused. That word again. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a slim folder. "For the past 20 years," I said, "I've managed a family trust, quietly, carefully. Everything was structured long before Daniel ever met Isabella." I looked at the guests. "The payments for this wedding were authorized through that trust, under my name." Isabella's face drained of color. Her mother leaned forward. "This is absurd. My husband handled the arrangements." "He coordinated them," I said gently. "He didn't fund them." A man near the front whispered, "Is this true?" I turned toward Daniel. "Do you remember when you said you couldn't afford the wedding you wanted? When you said Isabella deserved better?" Daniel swallowed. "I told you not to worry. I told you everything would be taken care of." His eyes widened. "You thought the money came from nowhere, or maybe you didn't care where it came from as long as it came." Isabella's mother stood abruptly. "This woman is lying." "Then allow me to clarify," I said. I nodded toward the side of the room. A man in a dark suit stepped forward. "This is Mr. Collins." I heard my name being shouted behind me as I stepped out into the warm night air, but I didn't turn around. For once, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. The sea breeze carried the distant sounds of chaos from inside the reception hall, raised voices, hurried footsteps, the unmistakable panic that comes when money disappears and truth takes its place. I walked slowly down the stone path, my sensible shoes clicking against marble that I had unknowingly paid for, and each step felt lighter than the last. I should have felt devastated. My only son's wedding had just collapsed, and I was the one who had pulled the final thread. But instead of grief, I felt something unfamiliar and powerful settle into my chest. Relief. For decades, I had lived my life apologizing for existing, apologizing for being old, for being quiet, for not fitting into rooms filled with people who mistook loudness for importance. And now, standing under the Italian sky, I realized I had finally stopped apologizing. I returned to my small inn that night, the one with the creaky stairs and the faded blue shutters. The owner greeted me kindly, unaware of the storm I had just walked away from. I sat on the edge of my bed and let the silence wrap around me. Then my phone rang. Daniel. I let it ring. Again. And again. Text messages followed. "Mom, please, this is a misunderstanding. You embarrassed us. We need to talk now." I turned the phone face down. For the first time since Daniel was born, I chose myself. The next morning, headlines were already circulating among the guests. In wealthy circles, scandal travels faster than truth, and this was the kind of story people whispered over espresso and croissants. Mother of groom halts wedding funding mid-reception. Shocking family drama at luxury Italian wedding. Bride's family left scrambling after financial revelation. I didn't read them. Instead, I walked along the shoreline alone, my feet sinking into cool sand, the waves washing over me like a quiet cleansing. I thought about the little boy Daniel used to be, the way he used to hold my hand when crossing the street, the way he once told his teacher with fierce pride that his mother could do anything. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten that. Around noon, there was a knock at my door. I knew before opening it who it would be. Daniel stood in the hallway, eyes red, suit wrinkled, the confidence he wore so easily yesterday completely gone. He looked smaller somehow, like the man he had become was finally stripped away, revealing the confused boy underneath. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I stepped aside. He sat on the edge of the chair, rubbing his hands together like he used to when he was nervous as a child. "They're furious," he said. "Isabella's parents, the vendors, everyone." I poured myself a cup of tea and sat across from him. "And how do you feel?" I asked. He hesitated. "I feel ashamed." The word hung between us. "Not because of the money," he added quickly, "because of what happened, because I didn't stop her." I studied his face. "When your wife called me a beggar," I said calmly, "what did you feel?" He swallowed hard. "I thought if I laughed it would pass," he admitted. "I didn't want to upset her family. I didn't want to cause a scene." "So you let her humiliate me instead?" I said. He nodded, tears spilling freely now. "I didn't realize how much it hurt you," he whispered. "That," I said gently, "is the danger of comfort. You stopped seeing me as a person. I became a background detail in your life." He covered his face. "She says you did this to punish her," he said quietly. I sighed. I didn't freeze the funds to punish anyone. I froze them to protect myself. He looked up. She never believed you had money, he said. She told everyone you were exaggerating, that you were delusional. I smiled sadly. I know. She said you'd ruin everything if people knew the truth. And yet, I replied, the truth is the only thing that set me free. Daniel was silent for a long time. Is there any way to fix this? The wedding? The damage? He asked finally. I met his gaze. There may be a way for you. The flight home was quiet. Not the uncomfortable kind of quiet filled with regret or second-guessing, but the kind that settles over you when a storm has finally passed and the air feels clean again. I stared out the window as the coastline disappeared beneath the clouds and realized something that surprised me. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about Daniel. I wasn't wondering if he had enough money. I wasn't calculating how I could help without being asked. I wasn't rehearsing apologies in my head for things I hadn't done wrong. I was simply at peace. Back home, my small apartment greeted me with familiar warmth. The ticking clock, the slightly uneven bookshelf, the plant by the window I'd kept alive for 10 years. This was the place Isabella had mocked, the place Daniel had described as tiny and sad. And yet, it had never demanded anything from me except honesty. The first week passed quietly. I slept deeply. I cooked meals I actually enjoyed instead of rushing through them. I took long walks without checking my phone every 5 minutes, waiting for a call that might never come. Daniel didn't contact me. Isabella did. The email was long, carefully written, full of words like misunderstanding, stress, emotions were high. There was an apology in there somewhere, buried beneath explanations and excuses, but it wasn't really for me. It was for the money, for the life she thought had been promised to her. I didn't reply. A few days later, Daniel called. His voice sounded different, quieter, stripped of the certainty he used to borrow from other people. I moved out, he said. I closed my eyes. I'm staying with a friend for now. I don't know what happens next. I waited. I keep replaying that moment, he said, when she said what she said about you, and I laughed. His voice broke. I don't think I can forgive myself for that. That's between you and yourself, I said gently, not me. He was silent for a long time. I don't expect you to fix anything. I just wanted you to know I see it now. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. That's a start, I said. We didn't reconcile that day. There were no dramatic apologies, no tearful promises. Healing doesn't work like that. It's slow, uneven, honest. But something had shifted. Weeks turned into months. Life settled into a rhythm that belonged to me again. I reconnected with old friends. I volunteered at a local community center. I laughed more than I had in years. Real laughter, not the polite kind meant to keep the peace. Daniel reached out occasionally, sometimes to talk, sometimes just to listen. He was learning who he was without hiding behind someone else's approval. And me? I learned something even more important. I learned that love without respect is not love, that silence does not equal dignity, and that standing up for yourself is not cruelty, it's survival. That night in Italy when I took the microphone, I didn't destroy a wedding, I saved myself. And if there's one thing I know now, it's this. No matter how old you are, no matter how small they try to make you feel, your voice still matters. You just have to decide when you're finally ready to use it.